Something in the air, always something in the air. Inexplicable, I can feel it in the air. Can you feel me? Can you feel me? Can you feel me? Something in the air, always something in the air. Inexplicable, I can feel it in the air. Can you feel me?
Good evening and welcome to Wild Splendor. My name is Taj Armstrong and I will be your host for the evening. Tonight we'll hear from Columbia Land Trust Executive Director Glenn Lamb, premiere our film, The Witness Tree, and share the many ways you make conservation possible. Before we begin our program, I'd like to acknowledge the history of these lands as a reminder that these are the native homelands of the Nez Perce, the Umatilla, Grand Ronde, Warm Springs, Yakima, Cowlitz, and Chinook people. Let us remember the resiliency of the indigenous peoples and that no matter where you are tonight, you are on native land. So I am thrilled to be here this evening. It has been a challenging year for everyone, events that have forced our country to confront the racism of its past and present, a worsening global pandemic which has changed our lives both personally and economically, and the devastating wildfires unleashed by our changing climate. These events and others like them provide an opportunity to exercise our resilience and create a world where we all thrive. This summer for me personally, with all of the heaviness and trauma that led to the Great Awakening, social awakening, adjusting to a new normal with COVID, I found myself emotionally depleted. I called up my dear friend Chris and I asked if I could tag along with her on her next hike. We went to Pup Creek Falls. Being outside, hearing the racing water, smelling the forest, and the sound of my feet on the forest floor gave me an instant release of all that I was carrying, and I discovered the healing power of nature, and I was addicted. And now I'm open to suggestions on how to continue to nurture my new love when it gets cold and rainy. Your passion for protecting the lands, waters, and wildlife of this region make our work possible. And we thank you again for joining us tonight. If you haven't already, I encourage you to register for tonight's event to be included in our free gratitude raffle to win a gorgeous Pendleton Woolen Mills blanket. Simply visit columbialandtrust.org/WildSplendor2020 and complete the registration form, or click the Register Now button above the stream. The gratitude raffle is our way of saying thank you for sharing your evening with us. Finally, tonight's presentation would not be possible without the support of our many generous sponsors. Their commitment to preserving the very nature of the Northwest inspires us. Please join me in thanking sustaining sponsor, Hahn and Associates, partner sponsors, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Dia Moore Associates, First Pacific Financial, Kelly Nolan and John Scott, and Olympic Property Group. Our patron sponsors, Columbia Bank, Hancock Forest Management, Interfluve, Schwabe, Williamson and Wyatt, Wapato Valley Mitigation and Conservation Bank, and our associate sponsors who are recognized on screen. Thank you. I now have the honor of introducing the Executive Director of Columbia Land Trust, Glenn Lamb. So Glenn, I have to ask, what is a land trust?
Well, Taj, it's a good way to start the evening answering that question. And simply put, A land trust is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to conserving the nature you love. And at Columbia Land Trust, we work in the Northwest from the east side of the Cascade Mountains, on the other side of Mount Hood and Mount Adams, all the way along the Columbia to the Pacific Ocean. And in that area, we carry out the 3 C's. We conserve, we care, and we connect. So first, conserve. We conserve important places that make our region so special. And you know these places. The ancient forests, our wild rivers, wetlands that are robust with lots of wildlife, farmlands, and even parks and trails. Secondly, we care for these landscapes. We restore them and manage them, the lands and waters, to benefit both wildlife and people. And third, we connect people to the land, whether in urban areas or further afield for volunteer and education opportunities or for outdoor recreation. Now, in our 30 years of doing this, we have now conserved more than 50,000 acres of land. Now think of the equivalent of 50,000 city blocks. That's what we've done. And we've engaged about 6,000 households, people like you, in our Backyard Habitat Certification Program in partnership with Portland Audubon. And it's a good thing that so many people are involved because nature, the nature that we love, faces so many threats every day. The Northwest population is growing, our climate is changing, and wildlife are losing critical habitat. And our job is to ensure that the region grows in such a way that nature and people all can thrive together tomorrow and for generations to come. Now, last year in this room at our annual Wild Splendor event with many of you, we shared the story of a unique opportunity to both conserve a forest and remove a dam in the Washougal River watershed. Now that's just east of Vancouver, Washington. And thanks to your support that evening, we have successfully conserved the 1,300-acre Wild Boy Creek property by acquiring it in March of this year. We did that together. And we are now primed to remove the dam beginning next summer in partnership with the Cowlitz Indian Tribe and to restore the surrounding watershed for salmon and steelhead. And once this is completed, it will be the 4th largest dam removal in Washington's history. This is just one of the dozens of projects currently underway. All added up together, you and us have conserved and are caring for so much of what we love and are connecting the next generation to nature. And this, I believe, is one of the most hopeful things that we have going today.
Wow, Glenn, it's amazing what we can accomplish when we come together to support our natural spaces. I know you will be joining us a bit later in our program, and I look forward to hearing from you again soon. Today, when climate change and species loss threaten every aspect of our Northwest way of life, the Land Trust looks to the Grays River watershed, just 20 miles east of the Pacific Ocean. We see unique opportunities to promote shared values such as sustainable forests, a thriving local economy, strong fish and wildlife populations, and a healthy river. We now invite you to join us on the banks of the Grays River, where salamanders crawl, salmon push upstream, and one ancient tree tells the story of change and resilience.
An ancient western hemlock tree stands in the same place it has for centuries along the Grays River. If this tree could talk, it could tell you the story of a place unique to the world, an iconic Northwest forest. This tree has witnessed changes all around it. The ancient history of old forests, the recent history of working forests. It stands as a testament to the past, present, and future.
Seeing that tree, it feels a little bit like discovery, and it feels a little bit like relief. If we were able to core the tree and do a nutrient analysis or an isotope analysis of what composed that tree, we would find ocean and we would find salmon. You'd see the whole history of salmon in this tree over the last 250 years. And that tree then marks the change of what's happening not just in the forest, but what's happening in the river. community of indigenous peoples from the coast all the way upriver. European settlers, many from the Scandinavian countries, came in the mid-1800s. In the 1900s, fishing, farming, and forests were kind of three pillars of the communities here. Logging slowly advanced into this watershed, really picking up in the 1940s. It's a little bit of a puzzle to me why that tree is still standing. All the trees around it were cut, but they chose to leave it for some reason.
Well, I suspect that hemlock may be a witness tree. Large trees that were situated very close to the survey lines on the land. When the hills were logged, the logging crews had to be very careful to leave the witness trees standing because they had to be able to know where the corners of the sections were. The tree would have witnessed generations and generations of pumas and eagles and the deer and the elk and all the other animals going through. But it wasn't too long until it would have started to see big changes all around it as the logging moved in more and more. And so I would say that big old hemlock has probably seen at least 4 cuts of timber all around it in the 200 years it's been there.
So ecosystems are really complex. They're all interconnected. And so you have trees, you have salmon, you have water, you have other wildlife species, and you can't pull apart one without impacting the others. A lot of the forest land in this watershed is owned and managed for timber interests. With logging, the tree canopy cover changes, the size of the trees, the character of the soil. As the old growth came off, the runoff increased. And so you have more water coming off the watershed faster. It's carrying more sediment. It's carrying it downstream to where people live. And so it erodes banks, it floods, it pushes into people's property.
I think the greatest challenge for our generation or our lifetime is going to be mitigating for and adapting to climate change. And with that, there's going to be reducing emissions, but also sequestering the carbon stored in the atmosphere. Forests play a huge role in that, and land trusts have this ability to buy land and let the forest grow and sequester carbon for forever, and so that's a really important role that land trusts can play that not many other people can.
What the land trust can do is to help to build back the texture and the long-term viability of the soils, the forest components, and the animal communities that live in the older forests. It'll take time, but it has to start somewhere.
So to find a tree or a grove of trees like this is very special. One, it gives us an indication into the past, and it also gives us confidence of what we can do with conservation management. And also, we just know that the habitat still is here. These trees are really important for marble murrelet. It's really important if we're going to recover the species that nesting habitat is protected and expanded. If you lose this tree, it's just one more tree, right? But it's the last of not very many trees remaining. And so how many more trees like this can we afford to lose before systems start to unravel and can't be put back together again?
It may seem like a lone sentinel in the forest, but this tree is deeply interconnected to a broader web of life, both beneath its canopy and far beyond. It gives nourishment, shade, and shelter. We believe in resilient, healthy ecosystems that balance forestry, recreation, and habitat. Through collaboration with local communities and conservation, young forests will continue the work of ancient trees like this hemlock. Be like an ancient tree in the forest. Give generously.
Tonight, we want to invite you to say yes to conserving and restoring nature, like the witness tree. Nature needs your generosity. You can make a difference. Make your gift today by going to our website at columbialandtrust.org, mailing in your check, texting Columbia to 44321, or simply click the Donate Now button above the stream you're watching. Your gift today can ensure the resiliency of forests, rivers, and wildlife in places like Gray's River Watershed. Please make your gift tonight. Join me to share the impact of your support. Joining me to share the impact of your support is Stewardship Director Ian Sinks. Welcome, Ian. We have several matching gift opportunities that will double the impact of gifts made tonight. And you're here to help us understand the difference those gifts will make. The Collins Foundation is generously matching the first $20,000 in new or increased gifts tonight. Starting us off tonight, Friends of the Land Trust, Sue Knight, Teresa Pauletto, Barbara Johnson, and Betsy and Tom Henning are matching the first 6 gifts of $5,000. Your gift tonight of $5,000 will become $10,000. Ian, what impact would $10,000 have on places like the Grays River Watershed?
Thanks, Taj. I am very happy to be here tonight. $10,000 could provide over 2 acres of permanent forest conservation. When conserving fragmented landscapes for species like the marble murrelet, every acre of forest is important. Trees like the witness tree are critical habitat for nesting, but without the surrounding forest, murrelets won't use it. So imagine an area of 2 city blocks, as Glenn referred to earlier. But instead of an alley, there is a creek running through the center. Instead of sidewalks, there are paths for wildlife and people. Instead of houses, there are trees, perhaps 400 of them greater than 24 inches in diameter. And imagine how each 2-block area is next to another 2-block area, which in turn connects to others and creates a contiguous forest. This is what we envision in some of the most important conservation areas that we work in.
That is amazing. If you are compelled to join Columbia Land Trust in forest conservation, please make a gift now. Simply go to our website, columbialandtrust.org, mail your check, text Columbia to 44321, or simply click the Donate Now button above the stream you're watching. You can make a gift of any amount at any time. Ian, the Dudley Family Foundation and Columbia Land Trust board member Lisa Amato and her husband Arnold Craig have come together to match the first 37 gifts of dollar for dollar, making your $1,000 gift $2,000. This is an incredible chorus of support for the Land Trust. Ian, what impact would $2,000 have?
Yeah, we could restore approximately 200 feet of riparian habitat, supporting all kinds of fish and wildlife species, including salmon.
Okay, so now I gotta ask, what's riparian?
Okay, so riparian habitats are those areas along creeks and rivers where water and land intermix. They're like a wetland, but with flowing water. And like wetlands, this is where we typically see a majority of the biodiversity in a landscape. Riparian habitats include the small hillside creeks where we found the Columbia torrent salamanders in the video, as well as the much larger mainstem Grays River where the chum salmon spawn.
Riparian habitats, how cool is that? Remember, making a gift tonight is easy. Simply go to our website, columbialandtrust.org, mail your check, text Columbia to 44321, or simply click the Donate Now button above the stream you're watching. Next, we have Columbia Bank and Friends of the Land Trust, Jake and Keith Daly, who are joining together to match the first 20 gifts of $100, dollar for dollar, making your $100 gift $200. Ian, can you tell us what the impact $200 would have?
Yeah, 200 acres can allow us to plant 100 native trees on lands we steward to improve its conservation values, including wildlife habitat. And over time, these trees will grow to remove more than 5 tons of carbon each from the atmosphere.
And why is removing carbon from the atmosphere so important?
Yeah, so for us to make an impact on climate change, we need to remove the carbon that's already in the air. Forest conservation, including planting and growing trees, is one of the most effective and efficient ways to do that. It's one of the most significant so-called natural climate solutions. So as trees grow, their leaves and needles absorb carbon and feed the structure of the tree both above and below ground. And of course, it's this structure, these large mossy branches more than 50 feet above the ground, that wildlife like the murrelet depend on for their nests.
That's great. So really, a gift of any amount, even $10, can plant trees that will create wildlife habitat and have an impact on climate change?
Yes, absolutely. Every dollar makes a difference in making our work possible. From conserving acres of forest, to restoring riparian habitat, to planting trees that sequester carbon, your gift has a big impact on the conserving the very nature of the Northwest.
Great. Thank you, Ian. Please make your gift now to support this very important work. It's easy to support the Land Trust. Go to our website, columbialandtrust.org, mail your check, text Columbia to 44321, or simply click the Donate Now button above the stream you're watching. And now, champion of Northwest Conservation and part of the all-volunteer board that founded the Columbia Land Trust in 1990, Glenn Lamb. As a founding executive director since 1998, Glenn has led the Land Trust through 30 years of growth and currently serves on the Land Trust Alliance's National Council. Speaking on our resilient nature, in the face of this difficult time we find ourselves in, please welcome back Columbia Land Trust Executive Director, Glenn Lamb.
Thank you so much, Taj. And when you just mentioned that, 30 years, I can't believe that it's been that long. But I also think of the time scale of some of these old trees. And it reminds me earlier in September when I came upon a huge downed tree in the woods. And I did something then that many of you have often probably done too, which is I counted the rings. And there were more than 200 years of growth in that one tree. And as I stood next to this downed behemoth, I couldn't help but feel reverent, being in the presence of a creature that lived easily more than twice as long as any human. And now one of the things that struck me was how for some decades those rings were wide, indicating very rapid growth. And yet for decades both before and after, the rings were thin, indicating slow growth. And I just wanted to know the story. I wanted to know more. What was life like for that tree that caused such dramatic variability in its growth? And I imagine, of course, old trees like that, like the witness tree, respond to changes in their environment. And even older trees, they've lived through huge droughts. There's been hurricane-force storms, earthquakes, around here, volcanic eruptions, and maybe even most importantly, the non-dramatic event of growing up in the shade of another tree. Or maybe it's massive erosion events that cut off a supply of nutrients. And recently, we've come to recognize that a tree's health is also influenced by its relationship to other nearby trees. And so it is with us humans as well. We are marked by the changes throughout our lives, and especially by our relationships to one another. Now, I'll have to admit that more than half of my life has been spent volunteering or working at Columbia Land Trust. And if I accumulated growth rings like a tree, they would tell the story of my life. And that would include an early marriage and later the wrenching agony of divorce. It would include having a dream job with the Parks Department, buying new parks and greenways and building trails. The early volunteering with the Land Trust, and that led to building relationships with farmers and foresters, incredibly rich experiences. That was a big growth year. And then there were the year when injuries took daily running from my life. And such a small thing, but it rocked me to my core. Another big moment was when I realized that I had not really educated myself about Native Americans, how they do live and thrive amongst us, still challenged by broken treaties and promises, and that we can actually do things about that now. That was a big learning. And then also new love with my now wife, Sue, and a life richer than I had thought possible, and now, too, unexpectedly this year, running again. So the Land Trust has had variable growth years too, just like I have. And those slow-going volunteer years were definitely slow growth, tight rings. But in the years of our first paid staff, we made much more rapid progress with dozens of properties being conserved. And then because we did that, we started realizing we really need to set priorities. And Ian helped to lead a process of setting scientifically based conservation priorities that allowed us to focus in on those most important places where we built relationships, where we really began the process of learning, the slow work of understanding different life experiences across urban and rural, liberal and conservative, across our racial and social differences. And all of that slow learning, those years with tight growth rings, have now led to the completion of impactful projects in the tens of thousands of acres. Included in that history was joining with Three Rivers Land Conservancy to form one much stronger land trust. And yes, we've removed dams already. And all of this has been built on that relationship building, relationships with each other. These are the fundamental markers in the history of Columbia Land Trust. Those are our growth rings. Now, none of this, personally or through the Land Trust, has prepared me for 2020. And the reality is, probably, that many of you are also still digesting the truths and emotion wrapped up in this deadly virus circulating among us. I know I struggle with it every day. The overnight loss of face-to-face contact with people I should be face-to-face with, so many of you. We always have been, and now we're not. Then, weeks ago, we had to begin spending days inside to avoid the smoke, those toxic hazards in the very air that we were breathing. And finally, in 2020, what I think of as this dreadful polarization and oversimplification of basic issues that deserve thoughtful debate about real complexities. Put all this together, and I honestly am still struggling every day to understand what it all means. And when I interact with some of you by video, I see deep sadness in some of you, cut off from face-to-face contact with your adult children or your young grandchildren, or maybe your parents or grandparents. Others of you, I know, are reconsidering what it means to be both a parent and an employee at the same time. And others of you have lost housing or dear loved ones. So I'm left, we're all left. Where is our resiliency in the face of these difficult days? How do we weather these tough times but emerge intact? What are our growth rings going to be like through this time? How are we changed by these experiences? And as always, I turn to nature. It has so much to offer us, and I think resilience looks like a tree that's had its top blown out in a storm, but grows a new top leader. It looks like a wild river carving a new channel. It looks like new pools and spawning beds where none existed before. And it looks like flowers taking root in the ashy soil of Mount St. Helens just months after that cataclysmic explosion. These are all things we have seen, and it will look like forests surging with new life after the fires, and also the unseen relationship between these trees. So while we're still living today with major disruption, and we're still challenged every day, never doubt that the seeds of new life and growth are everywhere amongst us. What will emerge as new vitality may not look familiar. We need to all be open to new relationships, new habits, new patterns, and remember that what may seem overwhelming this morning or tomorrow morning contains within it revitalization and new, if different, energy, and yes, even hope. Even if we can't see it somehow in any one moment. Nature shows us that surely. So at Columbia Land Trust, we seek resilience too, and our relationships with you now matter more than ever. Our work now matters more than ever. We're helping communities heal from fire, growing a culture of stewardship, managing land for resilience in the face of hotter and drier years, ensuring that the very nature of the Northwest has a positive advocate and champion, because that's us, that's you, and ensuring that nature is equitably available to all so that people can be immersed in the great nature of the Northwest. So as I look ahead, I see this being a time for us to have robust growth rings still. There's every reason to believe that we can continue to conserve the very nature of the Northwest. We're doing it together while fostering a culture of stewardship amongst us all. We do have great reason for hope. And that hope begins with you and with me and with all of us this very night. Thank you all ever so much.
Thank you, Glenn. Now, as we close our evening, a reminder that you can make a gift online at columbialandtrust.org. Mail your check or text Columbia to 44321 or simply click the Donate Now button above the stream you're watching. Before you leave tonight, Brent Ditton is the winner of our gratitude raffle and the Pendleton blanket. We will reach out to you tomorrow and make sure your blanket soon. Please enjoy. The resiliency in nature can be found in all of us. We hope we inspired you tonight. Thank you for joining us and for your commitment in protecting the lands, waters, and wildlife of the Pacific Northwest we all love.
Something in the